Hello again. This is a bit of a discussion around portfolios, particularly the way in which we're using portfolios as an assessment task in Introduction to Law, but also in how important your portfolio is going to be to you professionally, and particularly as part of your career and as a tool to which you'll use to get jobs and to get promotion within jobs. So, a portfolio is a collection of information about you, and it's a collection of evidence of the things that you can do, things you've achieved, and it's a way of providing additional details, particularly when you apply for a job. That aren't included in your cover letter or your CV. And some people have talked about portfolios being sort of a CV on steroids, and it's not entirely untrue, but it serves a slightly different purpose to a CV. Portfolio is where you collect the information that you then use in your letter of application, and where you provide evidence of the things, of the selection criteria that are required for a job. So really, at its fundamentals, a portfolio is just an online space where you store this information, and it could easily be a Google Doc that you've created, that you've shared with others, as it would be the Portfolium service that the university uses and has provided a subscription for you, and an ongoing subscription once you graduate as well. So yeah, once whatever you build in Portfolium, you can take with you throughout your career. It's something that you can keep using, although I'd make sure I backed it up as well, just in case Portfolium ever goes out of business. All right. So technically, what a portfolio is just a collection of text and links to evidence. It's quite simple, but a really good portfolio is really well designed, and the text guides the reader through the material. It doesn't say, oh, here's a whole lot of stuff, and here's a whole lot of certificates and assignments and letters of endorsement and whatever, and just look at it. You know, a good portfolio is structured and provides a guide for the reader to move through the material and to understand it. And in fact, what you can do with portfolios, and you can do with Portfolium, is to create alternative versions of the same basic material that's tailor-made for specific tasks. So if a particular job's coming up and you want to emphasize a certain aspect of your portfolio, and there are parts of it you think aren't so important, you're able to produce a copy of that portfolio and then to customize it so it's best focused and really, really oriented towards what that job requires. Now, a lot of you have experience in the job market, some of you may not have, but what you'll know is any job comes with a set of selection criteria, and these are things where to get an interview in the first place and to engage in an interview, you need to be able to provide evidence that you can do various things, and some things are, you need to be able to provide that you have a degree, and okay, your portfolio can have a copy of your graduation statement of the degree itself. But a lot of the things that you are asked for in jobs are things that are not things that you'll have to hand. So some selection criteria will say demonstrate evidence of leadership, or they'll say ability to work in a high pressure environment, or ability to work within teams and to resolve conflict in teams. And those are things you don't necessarily have a certificate or a piece of evidence that can come to hand. And one of the skills of creating a portfolio is to assemble enough of those pieces of evidence so that when you do come to apply for a job, you're able to refer the reader back to your portfolio and able to say, have a look at my portfolio, here's a link, and here's a link to the section on the training I did on conflict in teams, or here's a statement of an endorsement from a previous manager who talks about how good I am in resolving conflict in teams, or whatever that evidence is. But the important thing about getting started with a portfolio is not to be aiming too high to start with the basics, and to start with a basic template that you can build on, and we've provided you with one of those. If you have a look at the extra, the guide to portfolios that's on Moodle, gives you a good one to start with, and an example of one as well. And you use that portfolio to build over time, and you use it, and we'll come back to this comment again, I think, as a way of identifying gaps in your portfolio and gaps in your expertise and planning for those. So if you see a lot of jobs coming up that say, must have leadership, and you think, I don't really have anything good as an evidence of leadership, you can start looking for situations. You know, you can find an experience volunteering with an NGO, where they want someone to lead a volunteer team to do a certain task, to write a report. You go, okay, that'll be really good because I'll be able to help out that NGO. But what I'll also be able to do is collect some evidence that I can put in my portfolio. So when that question comes up in job interviews, I'll be ahead of the curve. And it's always worth having a bit of a look at the kind of jobs you think you'll be applying for in a few year times as a graduate, and looking for what they're looking for now, so you can start collecting that evidence, because your studies are not going to provide you with a lot of those other skills that people are looking for. So I mean, that probably brings us beyond what a portfolio is and more into the question of, well, why do you have a portfolio? And the fundamental reason that I've already identified is, job applications. We are in a situation where there are, and I don't need to tell you this, but I'll say it anyway, there are a lot more applicants for every job than there are jobs. Even in areas where employability is reasonably high, law has pretty high employability, criminology has reasonable employability, there's far from full employment, and a lot of jobs have a lot of competition for them. So it's definitely not the situation where you can just trot up with a degree and say, oh, I've got a degree, that's all I need, give me the job please, and they'll say, fine, you've got a degree, that's all we needed to know. And in fact, many employers are very suspicious of people who have nothing but a degree qualification. They want to see a rounded person, they want to see some previous experience, they want to see extracurriculars, they want to see analogous experience. If they want to see leadership, they don't necessarily want to see expect a recent graduate to have leadership in a high-level executive position, but they might find someone who's been a leadership in the restaurant that they've worked in, and they've been a shift leader, or they might be a leader of their baseball team, or something along those lines. So one thing that's a warning sign to employers is someone who just says, look, I have qualifications and nothing but, because that tends to say that person is not a rounded applicant, and they definitely don't have social skills, and they're not someone you want to work with. So one of the important reasons why you're building this portfolio is to not only be a rounded person, but to represent yourself to employers as this person who is someone they want to work with, who's someone that they can look at and go, yeah, I can see myself working with that person, and not being driven crazy by them. So there's a lot of important things going on in a portfolio. I've already alluded to the fact that it's not just about getting the job. There's also a professional development aspect where you can audit yourself, where as you go and you start collecting things in your portfolio, one thing you'll do over time is you'll be replacing evidence with better evidence. So if you get into a student mooting competition and you're the team leader in that, you might drop off that high school experience you had being the captain of the softball team. You might realise that one's not so important anymore. You take that out and you replace it with the moot team captain coaching experience there, leadership experience there as to replace that. So you'll find that as you go on, you'll start replacing materials, but you'll also be able to use your portfolio as a diagnostic and to go, okay, I've looked at some of the recent job applications, and they say they want someone who is good at working in a diverse environment. Now, what have I got that I could use as evidence for that? And I might not have anything that's right on, but maybe I can find something, and maybe I can do something that provides evidence of that. So if the perfect job comes up in the future, I don't have to go looking for an experience or try and make something up to justify that. I'll have something that fits that category as well. So at the very start, you're not going to be necessarily finding something to address all those selection criteria tasks. You might be an experienced person, you might have a background as a volunteer, and you might have a lot of life experience, you might be able to fill in a lot of them. But generally speaking, at the very beginning, you'll find there's not a lot, there are a lot of gaps in your portfolio, and that's fine, that's okay. And that will happen throughout your career, because jobs change, and you'll find suddenly there are things that are required, new technologies that are required, new ways of thinking and acting. Suddenly, something like social innovation or design thinking becomes important, and you might have a long career where you've never even thought about that, and then you need to try and find a way that you can build those skills and provide evidence of them. So Your portfolio is something that does that, and provides you a lifelong resource that you'll be able to use and customize and develop over time, and link into LinkedIn and sites like that. And one of the things about portfolios is they're shared, but you can control the way in which they're shared. So you don't have to put them out there on the internet for every crazy weirdo to find. You actually can regulate the way who you share it with, and what content that you share with people as well. All right. Now, one of the important concepts in portfolios is the concept of curation. And one of the best ways to think about a portfolio is it's a museum. It's a museum of you. And when you walk into a museum, someone's put a lot of thought into the curation process. What exhibits are provided, what the little pieces of text that describe the exhibits are, how you move from one display to another. And I'd like you to start thinking that way when you're thinking about creating a portfolio, that you need to have a guided experience, and you need to be able to not just cram, the old-fashioned museums, you just crammed a whole lot of things in, and you went into a room and there are 40 mummies in that room. And, once you've seen 4 mummies, the extra 36 mummies aren't quite as interesting after that. And some people's portfolios have that sort of experience. Now, people who are looking at your portfolio are going to be very busy, and they're going to have all levels of job application they're going to look at. Some of them won't have portfolios at all. That's easy. They go straight on the discard pile. And others, the ones that have the best, clearest, easiest to navigate portfolios, are the ones that will rise to the top, as well as ones that have good evidence as well. But you can have really good evidence. I mean, mummy number 32 might be the best mummy in the world, but if people stop looking after mummy number 4, then your museum is not really doing its job, and you really should have put that really good mummy really up the front where it could be seen by everyone. So use that museum metaphor, and go to a museum, have a think about it when you walk around, look at what works for you and what doesn't, and use that experience to think about that guided experience you'll be providing with a portfolio. But as I said, right back at this early stage, you're not really going to have necessarily all that much material to put in, but you just want to get started, and you want to be able to set those objectives for what you're going to do as you go and how you're going to build it later on. Now, for assessment in this subject, you've got the 4 items you need to include in your portfolio. Good news is you get a full 5% for each of those, and if you do each of them, you get 20 out of 20, so that's great news. So briefly, I'll go through each of the 4 here, and this is something that you can always ask questions about later, of course, and discuss in more depth. But item number 1, a portfolio based on the template provided. That shouldn't be too difficult. The template's in the guide. Now, you don't have to stick to that template absolutely rigorously. Don't expect that, but it's at least a way to get started, and to talk and to think about the sorts of information you put in there, and to move beyond the way most people think about what you put in, say, a CV, and to think about it being, well, it's a little bit different to that, and it's really based around what you can do rather than what you have done. So your traditional CV is, I've done this job, I've done this job, I've done this job, and, it doesn't really tell you how well you've done those jobs, or why you've left those jobs, or whatever. It's just a list of things you've done, whereas a portfolio is more about those things you can do. So your first stage 1, is to get that template out there and to think about those things. Stage 2 is to think about your capabilities, and to describe, say, 3 to 5 really basic capabilities of what is it you can do. What are the things that you are strengths at, and what are the things that you have evidence that you have strengths of those things are. Now, at this stage, your evidence might be things that you wouldn't necessarily desire later in your career. If you've worked at McDonald's through the last few years of your high school, you're not going to be using that as an experienced lawyer necessarily, going for that promotion to senior partnership. But at your start, when that's the best experience you have, look at what that experience shows and what it demonstrates, and think about it. Well, I've been shift manager, and I have to make sure everyone's on the roster, and I have to make sure everyone's organised. Okay, in terms of a capability, that might mean that I can show that I'm good at organising people. I'm good at negotiating agreements between people. I'm good at timetabling and those sort of practical things. So don't just think about, oh, I only worked at McDonald's. It doesn't mean anything. It's just McDonald's. Think about what it is you can do and how you can then parlay the evidence you have. And the evidence might just be I've worked at McDonald's for 4 years, or it might be I've worked at McDonald's for 4 years and I've been made team member of the month several times, or it might be I've got a letter of endorsement from my supervisor that talks about how good I am at managing people, you know. Or it might be a video your supervisor's created for you that talks about how great you are. That's even better. So you think about the way in which you can harvest evidence out of that experience and link that into your portfolio. So stage 2 is just to think of 3 to 5 things that you can do. Remember, you get 5 out of 5 for doing this. So, you know, we're happy to give you feedback on it, but we're not going to be sitting in judgment there going, oh, I'm not sure about that one. What's important is you get this stuff out there and you start thinking in that portfolio way of approaching things. All right, so what's number 3? Well, number 3 is an exercise by which you're going to create some content to put in your portfolio. And that is doing the iChange certificate, and there's links on Moodle to it. And what that is, it's a short course, it'll take you a couple of hours to do, that introduces the idea of social innovation, and particularly introduces CQU's role as Australia's only, at present, changemaker university. So that's a really useful little short course to do. It's quite easy, you just have to read some text, watch some videos, answer some multiple choice questions. And when you finish that, you get a certificate. Now that certificate is, you know, one of your first pieces of evidence to put in your portfolio, where you put it, you upload the certificate, and then you curate the certificate. So, you know, the person who's wandered into the museum of you wants to know, what's an iChange certificate? What does that mean? So you can do a little bit of a description around it. You can say, well, my university is a changemaker university. It prioritises social innovation. Social innovation is good for ... and you'll know by the time you do the certificate what social innovation is good for. And that gives a little bit of context. And that may mean the difference, you know, it's not going to win you a job over someone who's got vastly superior grades than you do and lots more experience or volunteering or whatever. But if you've got someone who's sort of at an equivalent level and they don't have much in their portfolio, and this is something which catches the attention of someone who's sifting through the job applications, and that's great. Someone goes, oh, what is social innovation? That looks interesting. That looks like something that would be useful for my organisation. So part 3 is doing that iChange certificate, and that's providing you with your first thing to stick in your portfolio. And the 4th and last part is creating a video where you talk about your ethos. Now, there's a little bit of a guidance on that in the portfolio's guide, and it's only 2 to 5 minutes. It's very, very short. I'd go shorter rather than longer, honestly. And it's just talking about yourself and talking about why is it that you want to be a lawyer, or why you want to be a criminologist, how you see your role in society in achieving broader social good. So it's about giving people an idea that you have values and you're committed to the sort of ethos that their organisation has. And that you're not someone who's saying, well, I just want to work for you because I want money and I want to do the bare minimum I have to do to get by. So this is something that's really important. It personalises you. When you're going through job interview panels and culling people, it's much harder to cull people who you see as a person. So this is a bit like, I suppose, hostage negotiations, where you try and, you know, make the kidnapper understand the hostage as a person, but you're doing that in a job interview context or a job application context. You're trying to personalise and give that person the idea that this is someone they want to work with. Now, more practically, it also demonstrates to us that you are able to create a video, upload it, share it, and that's important. There'll be extra resources for all that technical stuff as well. But going forward, it's really important that you are able to demonstrate those sort of things. Creating videos is a very important skill, and it's something that has a bit of a learning curve to it, and particularly getting over the cringe curve. Like, I've been doing videos for ages and I've gotten used to seeing myself on video. I still don't like it very much, but when I started, it was an awful process of getting used to creating videos and then watching them and editing and everything else. So we want to get you started with that early. You might already be a great YouTuber and you're out there doing your lifestyle videos and being an influencer, in which case you'll find this very easy to do. But for everyone else, we want to get you started on those skills early so that you have time to get over to get used to using the technology and get over that cringe of, is that what I look like? Is that what I sound like? Oh my God. So that you're actually able to get used to it and work in that space. So anyway, there's the four pieces of the portfolio task, but this is just the beginning. This is the start of creating that portfolio, and you'll be building that throughout your time at university and throughout your career. And this is just a good place to get started.